Good morning, everybody. It's your favorite aspiring revolutionary here. I'm wondering author, reminding you that we are all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same. Spend less, live more under freedom with frugality. Opening part 3 of the Metaphysics, Aristotle reminds us that we have to acquire knowledge of the original cause. Since we usually only say we know something if we recognize the first cause, this makes sense, and causes are spoken of in 4 senses. 1. The substance or essence cause. 2. The matter or substratum. 3. The source of change. And 4. The cause opposed to this, or the purpose and the good. As regarding this fourth cause, Aristotle points out that the purpose and the good are the end of all generation and change, meaning like end purpose. To start the examination of these causes, we will look at those who have attacked the philosophy of being elucidated by Aristotle. Philosophers may not agree with Aristotle, yet they still argue from principles and causes, so we can learn something from them. Looking at how and what they argue should make us feel more certain about the correctness of this inquiry. Quote, of the first philosophers, most thought the principles which were of nature were the only principles of all things. Quote, that of which all things that are consist, the first from which they came to be, the last into which they are resolved, the substance remaining but changing in its modifications. This, they say, is the element and principle of things, and therefore they think nothing is either generated or destroyed, since this sort of entity is always conserved. As we say, Socrates neither comes to be absolutely when he comes to be beautiful or musical, nor ceases to be when he loses these characteristics, because the substratum, Socrates himself, remains. Just so they say nothing else comes to be or ceases to be, for there must be some entity, either one or more than one, from which all other things come to be, it being conserved. So this is getting at the argument of the one. There is a lot of contention as to the nature of the one, and he will, or the one, will come into view later. So not all first philosophers agreed on the quantity or quality of these principles. Thales of Miletus is said to have believed the first principle was water. Aristotle conjectures that the notion of Thales that water was the principle is due to the fact that the nutriment of all things is moist, that seeds have a moist nature, and water is the origin of most things with a moist nature. It's not too difficult to see how a first philosopher may have considered water to be the first principle of all things, considering how ubiquitous water is, and all things that are alive, including plants, need water in order to live. However, to say that water is the first principle of all things is quite a leap. Anaximenes and Diogenes make air prior to water, and the most primary of the simple bodies, while Hippasus of Metapontium and Heraclitus of Ephesus says this of fire, and Empedocles says this of the 4 elements, adding earth. Empedocles believed the 4 elements did not come into or go out of being, that they were, in other words, eternal. Similarly, Anaxagoras thought the principles were infinite in number. Anything that was of like kind only changes through aggregation or segregation, rather than being created or destroyed, and were thus eternal. Aristotle posits that from these perspectives, the only cause might appear to be the material cause, or the first cause, the one of substance. However true it may be that all generation and destruction proceed from some one or from more elements, why does this happen, and what is the cause of this? The substratum or substrate never changes itself. Wood does not turn itself into a chair, nor bronze a statue. Something else causes this change. Seeking this is to seek the second cause, that from which comes the beginning of movement. Maintain that there is only one cause, fail to see how nature is changeable. But for those who make more elements, it is more possible to state the second cause. For e.g., for those who make hot and cold the elements, they treat fire as having a nature which fits it to move things, and water and earth they treat in a contrary way. So if you argue only from those first causes, that nothing's ever created or destroyed, and all things are eternal, you are not taking into account the fact that we see changes in our day-to-day life throughout things. And so what is exactly causes this movement? That's the second cause, the one of the substratum. When these men and the principles they studied were found by truth to be inadequate, they were forced to look at the next cause. For it is not likely that either fire or earth should be the reason why things manifest goodness and beauty, both in their being and in coming to be. Nor again could it be right to entrust so great a matter to spontaneity and chance. The first man to suggest that reason was present anywhere there was order or arrangement was brilliant in comparison. Those who thought such things stated that there is a principle of things which is at the same time the cause of beauty and of movement. For many people, this principle that is the cause of beauty and of movement, as we will find out, turns out to be God. However, that's the end of part 3 of the Metaphysics. So my questions to you remain the same. What are you doing in order to inspire, uplift, and empower your local community today? Because this world isn't changing unless we all do our part. And you can count on me to do mine daily. Till next time, Wandering Author here, signing off.